Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of CIBC, we really want to thank the World Strategic Forum for the opportunity to talk to you all this afternoon. It's an exciting opportunity for us to talk about our business. I'm joined with 4 colleagues in this space, and I think you're in for an exciting topic. As mentioned, my name is Dan Sullivan, and I'm with CIBC and part of our private wealth practice, where I'm responsible for the private banking area. I've been in banking for over 30 years, and I love the private banking space because working with individuals and families, I've learned one thing: they're not the same. All families are different, especially the wealthier they get, and the more multi-generations you have, the dynamics come into it. The topic that we thought about talking about today and why we did it is there's a new buzzword in our industry. It used to be years ago, you'd hear the phrase trusted advisor. Today, it's family office. Everybody throws around the phrase family office. What it is, whether it's an ego, talk to my family office, how do you create a family office? It's the great unknown, but everybody loves to say it. So, as mentioned, I'm joined with 4 individuals that are passionate about this space. They're experts in their field, and we thought we'd have a conversation about all of the different experiences that we've had working with individuals, families, and the family office. So, I'm going to kick it off, and I'm going to start with Jennifer to allow her to give her introduction. She's got a great background and how she got to this space. So, Jennifer.
Hello, everybody. Jennifer Quent. Before I begin, I just wanted to thank you, Dan and Beth, on behalf of the CIBC marketing folks. You guys, they created the most innovative yet functional marketing swag at Heckerling last year, the plastic pizza cutter, CIBC pizza cutter. And it is a fan favorite in my house, and we use it on a weekly basis. So I have a rather untraditional professional background. I started my professional career at the age of 17, dancing with American Ballet Theater. Upon my retirement from the performing arts, I worked in various capacities, supporting ultra-high net worth and executives in various industries, e-learning, finance. And for the past 6 years, I've worked in a multifamily office. I love what I do very much because no 2 days are the same. And it's a really great marriage of all of my professional and personal background because no 2 clients are the same, their needs are not the same, and every day is a different day. So get off to Deanna.
Thank you. So I just want to welcome everybody and super glad to be here. And thanks to everybody at the World Strategic Forum for inviting us. I'm Deanna Guerreiro, the founder of Athlon Family Office. We focus on mentoring athletes, pro athletes, on financial literacy. So our 3 platforms are basically get on a dang budget so you don't go broke, right? Invest into strategic companies that will create wealth, and then also save for the rainy day, which is private wealth. And so we focus on sports acquisitions. We're part of the Arctos NFL fund that is investing in 6 teams, minority shares in the NFL, which is really great. The Gronkowskis are partners, investors with us, and we have the majority ownership of Texoma FC, which is a USL soccer team in Texas. And we focus on different types of companies that we put private equity investments into.
Eric?
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Eric Aaronson. I'm a senior investment analyst and staff attorney at Mark Cuban Company's organization, which is Mark's family office based out of Dallas. I'm actually here local, or sort of local. I'm a Broward County guy up in Fort Lauderdale. So I've been with Mark's family office for about 7 years, a little over that now. I do a lot with his Shark Tank investments outside of Shark Tank. So my lane is very, venture capital. And as you see, we do a lot of venture capital at that office. So there's going to be a lot of different perspectives on stage today, but that is very much a heavy focus of my lane and the office's lane, despite some of the other amazing things that you hear him do about. He's very public about it. But my quick background was, undergrad at University of Florida, then went to law school at Nova Southeastern University outside of Fort Lauderdale. From there, had an opportunity to go work on Capitol Hill in D.C., then actually came back here, was in West Palm Beach doing local government land use and lobbying, and kind of got a whole different sort of, perspective there. and then had the opportunity to move to Dallas to join Mark's team, and now I am back here. So once again, thank you very much for having me, and I'll kick it back to the end over there.
There you go. Beth?
Hi, my name is Beth Mayfield, and I work with Dan at CIBC Private Wealth. I am a relationship manager and head up our office in Atlanta. I work primarily in our family office space with our ultra high net worth clients. And prior to joining CIBC, my background is I was a practicing attorney. I practiced law for about 25 years. My practice focused specifically on estate planning, tax planning, as trust and estate administration. And I've sort of parlayed into the wealth management space about 7 years ago. And I work alongside our colleagues that do investment management and do the banking. And then I really sort of hone in on those family office clients to provide those services or those planning services for them.
Thank you all. This is thrilled to be up on the panel with all of you and the experience. As we talked about, I figured we'd start with, and maybe Deanna, I'll turn it over to you. Why create a family office? When somebody comes and says, I need a family office, how do you react to that? And what's the first reaction?
Why? Why do you want to do one? What's the motive? What are you trying to achieve? Because, I mean, it became like this fancy, I think a lot of people are trying to get into the family office space, but they don't really understand the legacy of what's it about, right? And a lot of times families don't realize it's going to cost you an enormous amounts of money to maintain that family office. So what's the purpose? What are you trying to accomplish, right? That's the first thing. So I try and find out really what their needs are. And, I had an NFL player who was like, his agent called me. Well, it was his wealth advisor called me. He's thinking about doing a family office. And I'm like, why? Well, because he wants to get into venture capital. Okay, that's not the reason to do a family office, right? It's going to cost him so much money. If he wants to just do direct investments, we'll help him put some vehicle together, right?
And I don't think people realize the full cost that's involved with that either. The human capital component, the overhead for all of that. I work at Kaufman Rossin in their family office services division. We're a multifamily office. We basically become an individual or a single family office. We're great at what we do. We're the plug and play option. And so I the same thing. It's like, why do you want to have all that headache? Maybe hire a few key individuals that we can work with, but we're your back office. We know what we're doing. We know all the pitfalls. We hire all the individuals that become your team so that you don't have to deal with that when they leave the next day. So I do think that that's an education tool because certain people reach a certain net worth and they think I got to have a family office. They don't understand what goes along with that.
Not to mention due diligence. When you're looking at investments, what do you know about due diligence? What is the background that you have to make really intensified decisions on direct investments or even setting up a fund, right? So you got to make sure that you're putting together the right crew of people that's going to help manage it, that's going to have a fiduciary mindset rather than it's all about profit, right?
And I think sometimes too, at CIBC, we do more of a, Jennifer, similar to you, where we sort of serve as that quarterback. We work with outside advisors. It becomes much more economical where, we sort of, they can get sort of, it's a share the cost of everything. But as you're working with clients, we are so in tune with what they need. And we have one particular, client family. And from a AUM standpoint, they could absolutely basically support a single family office, but there just hasn't been a need. And so to your point, it's not just a dollar sign that when you get to this level, I need a single family office. You've really got to see, what are the services? What do you need? And what does it support it? Is it justified?
Yeah.
And I'll even sort of just topple on all of it. I mean, especially the more active you get. I mean, we have a full family office that includes a couple of me, other attorneys that just do attorney work. A lot of different accountants, other sort of, specific advisors that might have domain expertise. You're like, hey, how are you going to do diligence on something, super technical? So to really build out that family office, it is a lot of overhead. It is a lot of headcount. And I don't think it would make sense for a lot of folks to really set that up. I think it takes good advisors to say, hey, you're at a stage, or maybe this is what you want to do, it makes sense, but know what you're getting yourself into. And it's a lot of sort of people to manage. And also to your last point of making sure kind of everyone is rowing in the right direction is sort of part of their team. Because one of the most important, like, sort of ethos is of sort of, you know, working for the Cuban organization is just knowing that you are a custodian of someone, of their money, and sort of, and their brand.
And I think also checks and balances come into play. I mean, I've seen a lot of individuals, ultra high net worth individuals, and they have a small family office, but they have one or two people doing so many things. They're paying their bills. They're inputting into the books. I mean, there's nobody checking to make sure that there's not theft going on. So, you know, when you have somebody else, like, you know, our family office services, you've got a set of eyes, you know, whether that be an elderly family member that might have, you know, written 3 checks to the same vendor by mistake or not by mistake. You know, so you got to think about that. You know, just because you hire one great person, who's watching them? So it's a big deal.
That's great. And so you've all said some things. I want to get to the exciting part because you've all said the word investments and venture capital and chasing returns. So Eric, I'm going to go back to you since obviously your family office invests in some unique opportunities. Talk about sort of the strategy, how that fits with the family and how you approach that and what they're looking for.
Oh God, how much time do we have? I mean, yeah, clearly we do. What was the saying that you started is, once you've met one family office, you've met one family office. And we definitely go very heavy into venture, more than any family office that I've ever run into. Most of these family office networks that I go to, it's what's the next sort of real estate deal that you're doing, or how's our, you know, oil and gas wells kind of doing. We do a lot of heavy venture. And sort of what is the thesis behind it? I mean, we like to maintain sort of, even though we're minority investors in these ventures, that's how VC works. I mean, we like to play active roles in the companies and like to be advisors, and we want them to keep us updated on a continual sort of weekly, monthly basis so we can give impact and help out. And you get to sort of do that when you invest early on the venture sort of side, rather than let me invest in some well-established something that's raising their Series F round, where you're kind of just another name on the cap table at that point. Even if it's a famous name, you know, you're only going to have so much. So I think it goes a little bit of our ethos of, we like to participate and add value and only want to invest in where we think we can add value more than just dollars. So that's probably a good reason. I mean, given the show of Shark Tank aside, but still aligned with that, is we like to be involved with what we're doing and not just be, here's some money and call us when you either IPO or go bankrupt.
Well, Deanne, you obviously work with an interesting crowd, a dynamic crowd in the sports field. So anything on your side that you see, or how do you advise them to protect their wealth, given the short tenure in their career?
That's a really loaded question. Okay. Well, first of all, I always tell them, learn to say no. I mean, they have every single person that you can imagine reaching out to them. Can you invest in my company? Can you do this? Can you do that? And I'm like, you have to sit down with them and really try and find where their focus, right? For example, I had a hockey player that played for Tampa Bay, right? So I have lunch with him and his wife, and he's got real estate that he's just totally passionate about, right? And I'm telling him, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You really need to diversify. And so he's like, well, tell me about your strategy. What do you have? And who sat down with you, right? And he's got 3 LLCs for each one of his multifamily units, right? I go, where's your main company? Where do you have that registered? I don't have one, but you need to have one. Why do I need to have that? I'm W-2. I'm a W-2 wage earner. I'm like, dude, you're an athlete, okay? A pro. And so I had to sit down and go, we need to create an LLC that you're going to funnel all those companies underneath of it. And they didn't even know that. I'm like, I can save you like $450,000 a year in taxes just by putting them all together in the right, order. And those are a lot of the questions that I'm having with them. And they'll call me about, hey, I was out with these guys. I met these guys. They have this company. Do you want to take a look at it? And I start looking at it going, there's nobody important on the executive board, meaning there's no one of credibility, right? So there's a lot of things their friends are throwing money into, and they think it's a great thing to jump on there, and it's not. And so you have to really spend time with them and tell them, no, you cannot invest in this, and here's why, right? Or if it is a good company, but it's missing some elements, let's see if we can bring in the right people and help, let's help build this company first, get it to where it needs to go before you put some money into it, right? So there's a lot of strategies that I really try to work with them.
So Jennifer and Beth, question for both of you, and since this is about legacy planning, how do you coach a family on legacy planning and what that means? What do you think that means when somebody says we had a multi-generation, how do we plan this out? What advice, how do you work with families in that way? I'll start with.
I think the first step really is communication. What I see from a lot of clients that come to us, like an aging patriarch, they're really worried about passing the baton. And I don't think that they've had those conversations routinely with their children, or if it's a third generation. And that's not good. And when there is no communication and routine communication, it's like the firefighting mentality. You certainly don't want your children and your grandchildren to have to make a really huge, major decision without doing those, low stress, situational, instances where, have them decide about something that's a little bit smaller, whether that's investment based or philanthropic based, get them involved. There should be a plan in place. What's going to happen when the patriarch gets to, let's say, 55? Is somebody else going to be starting to take over the business? Do they need to have certain education to take over the business? I just think that people, because we hate to talk about aging and death, we just don't until it's a bit too late. So I think, putting a structure in place, whether that's, and I'm sure Beth can talk to that a little bit more about the different types of, put a charter in place, maybe for the family, but then also individuals, because some people are not on the same page, like even couples. Like a husband and a wife might have two totally separate ideas of what they want to do with their money and their legacy. So.
No, that's just a great, everything you said is just dead on. And typically when I look at legacy planning for our clients, there are typically three things that I hone in on. And, families come to us at different stages of where they are in this. But the first one is sort of that strategic planning that you mentioned. That's just the nuts and bolts. That's your planning. That's your working with the attorney, getting your trust set up, getting the document set up, working with outside advisors, the CPA, the attorney, to get the wealth ready for the future generations. That is a key piece, because if that's not done properly, then you're sort of handicapped right out of the gates. But the second thing we focus on is really, I like to call it, we like to stress developing, I call it a healthy wealth culture. A lot of times with families, money can be deemed this thing that's not talked about, or it's taboo, or we don't want to, we're not going to talk about it. And that, like you said, that's not good. You really need to work with families and to open that communication up and hone in on, what are your family values? What do you stand for? A lot of times we'll even create what we call a family mission statement. What is this family all about? Is there a family business? What's your story? We've brought in videographers that do, backgrounds on the family business, so generations, 3 generations down, they can see what matriarch and patriarch did and how this amazing business that's.
And I think that just wealth in general is more than money. Like what really makes a wealthy person? What is important to them, whether that be their career, whether that be the arts, whether that be philanthropy, and teaching your children that it's not just about how much money we have, but what really satisfies and fulfills us and makes us human beings. That wealth needs to be talked about.
Absolutely. It's, wealth is about so much more than just dollars on a piece of paper. It's about how you can use it in ways that are important to you, your family, your community. And so that's just such a huge piece of it. And then that third prong that I think so many times, Dan, to your point, gets overlooked. It's creating, educating those future generations. I think so much time and so much effort gets spent on, I like to call it getting the money ready for the kids. And the really successful families, they spend equally amount of time getting the kids ready for the money. And that can be education.
Basic financial education.
Yes.
The clients that I have seen that have the best families, their kids have bank accounts, savings accounts, checking accounts. They learn about debt. They learn what a FICO score is. I mean, I went and taught at the Boys and Girls Club in Palm Beaches many times, and people look at you like, what is a FICO? They look at you like you're talking about an alien ship. They don't even know about these things. So I think really like sitting down with teenagers, and it doesn't matter how much money you have, you really have to start at that basic foundation. And then if you've got a private foundation, bringing them into that, in a slow, steady way, I think is so important.
And we did something with one particular client, family office client that has been so successful, that I just want to mention it. It's the third generation. So you've got matriarch, patriarch. They're, 3 kids in the G2 level, and they're 8 grandkids, and they're all probably in their mid-30s. They're married. They all have children. And at the request of G1 and G2, we have started on an annual basis. We coordinate, a retreat with that G3 level, and we go for a weekend. We go away. We've gone to Pinehurst. We've gone to, where did we go recently? We've gone somewhere in Virginia. And
I think that's so important, because then you're actually seeing, like, let's say a particular family really invests in a particular organization, to go and see how you're really affecting the people that organization is helping. I mean, just throwing dollars at it is very different than going on a field trip and really seeing.
And it's made a world of difference in this family. We started in 2020, right before the world came to a halt. I think we were the last visitors at Pinehurst before it shut down. But it was amazing. And we started again in 22, and we do it every year. And it's just been so successful that if, you have clients or families, it has been so successful that I think it's something that every family should do. It makes a world of difference.
It's a huge thing, because like with my father, my grandfather and my grandmother had multiple businesses, right? And so my dad's one of 8 brothers and sisters. And so we have a long line of entrepreneurs, like 13 generations. And when I was 10, my dad got us our own bank account. My dad in junior high, I started helping doing his accounting in his company, because he didn't trust his CPA, right? And so my dad came from a working family where everybody went to work, everybody learned the business, and my dad's brothers and sisters, so there's 8 of them, they all worked in the 3 different companies that my grandma and grandpa owned, right? And so my dad did the same thing that was taught to him, that his father taught him and his grandfather taught his dad, and on and on and on. And that's a strategy that even with our NIL kids, that we're working with them, because they don't have bank accounts. They're getting NIL money, and then they're like, wait, I have to pay taxes? What's that?
So sad. Those children don't know anything.
They have no idea. So you have to really sit down with them and teach them, you got to get a bank account. Okay. We're going to get you set up with a CPA so that you can get proper taxes done. And that's work on, because you can tell which ones are probably going to get a pro contract. So let's get a trust.
Well, I think the key is, and you all hit on it, and the big change is the communication. We have to break down that old image of, it's my wealth, I can't talk about it. You guys, sort of that view of the reading of the will to find out what you got, that has to stop. If you don't talk to the next generation, and we've seen it in our space, how many times do the kids look at the generation above and say, I don't want that? And Jennifer, you mentioned private foundation. Is that a way? I mean, what drove you to that
I mean, many of our clients have private foundations. We've seen an uptick in private foundations being formed lately. And I think it's just a wonderful way to give back to the community, but also involve your family. I go back to the successful families that are educating their children on basic fundamentals, but also getting involved with the philanthropy. Yes, school is a priority, but when they get to be about college age is when they really start integrating them into the philanthropy and what are your ideals? What is important to you? And that's going back to not doing this major fire drill. It's like giving them certain responsibilities so that they're educated. Am I going to pass the baton to you? How am I going to be able to take over the foundation for the family? What is the family's ideals? Going back to the mission statement. So I think it's a lovely tool used in the right way.
It could really also, help families learn how to work together as well. The G3 retreat that I mentioned earlier, on the last day of the retreat, that's what we focus on. The family has a family foundation, and they have basically given a portion of the grants that are given each year to the G3 to decide on. And it's really fun to sit there and watch them, come together as cousins and figure that out and where they want to give. And it's fun to see.
So I'll jump in here, and then it's more sort of posing a question back to you all, because you're the more experts here than I am. But I mean, we're about to go through this huge generational wealth transfer. I was reading, what is it, 80 trillion over the next
73 trillion, I think, by 2045.
I round up. But you're seeing sort of, so apparently, actually, I was on a family office conference actually yesterday, and they were speaking about that the actual first transfer is actually not directly to sort of like the, the Gen X millennial, but it's actually to the widowed women. But in similarity to maybe, I'm a millennial and sort of this generation of the sort of the wanting to move into sort of impact investing. When you were talking about sort of philanthropy, maybe we talk about, so I will say, venture impact events, investing, maybe that's something that has to do with the climate, because that is something very pressing for sort of my generation. So I mean, my generation sort of, we grew up on seeing Shark Tank for the last 16 years. You've seen the movie The Social Network. Podcasts where you track all these different startups. Every startup now has access to social media, so you can see the sort of birth of these companies, where I think in past generations you were never really able to see that. So my gut is going to tell me that if I'm taking over some of the money, just giving the statistics that are out there, you're going to see a big sort of, shift in, I want to deploy some of what I'm getting into these sort of, early stage feel good things, or impact, they affect my life. I want to be there. And sort of, I'm now putting it back on you guys as saying, how are you already having that conversation, with families who see that those that are going to sort of take over maybe don't want to, or not as focused on just protecting the corpus as much, but want to get into some of these more riskier asset classes?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Dan, if you were going to say.
It's a balance. I mean, we see it all the time sitting there, and I have one relationship that is transitioning, and it's going to the second generation. And when we were preparing, I think I mentioned to you, she was the second generation who's going to take over the office, basically said, I have my network and I have my ideas and I'm going to take it. And it was interesting for me to see the dynamic there, because her father was still sitting there, and as he's giving up control, we'll see how that plays out. But that's the key that I think we're seeing in our space, is the second and third generation want to do something different than mom or grandma and grandpa.
Yeah. And I mean, and I'm even seeing it now in, that third, second or third generation, where even within a family, I mean, siblings are going different directions. I mean, we have one client that we're working with right now, and she is 100%, she wants to redistribute her wealth. I mean, that is her goal. She has got a plan. She needs X number of dollars to live, and the rest of it she's giving away. And it is, I mean, we're on a we're on a path to make that happen. So she does not want to pass it down past her children. It's going to stop. And so that's very different than, what we've done with most of our clients, where we're creating, in a lot of states now, you can keep trust in place for 360 years. So this generational wealth will go for a very long time. And she's just said, no, after my children, there's no more. So
one of the things too is we had a billionaire, and his kids, so they're the first generation, right? They want nothing to do with his business. And he's absolutely heartbroken because he's like, I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, they're angry at you because you didn't go to their football games. You didn't go to their recitals. You were working all the time, and they're very upset. And so you see this more in family offices than you can possibly imagine. This is a real dynamic that's a lot. And so I told him, why don't you put your energy, pick one of your grandchildren that is most like you, that you can put your energy and teach them what you didn't teach your own kids. Because you got to be able to, you have to teach them to take on and be the next matriarch when the one dies, right?
And this is just like going back to we're human beings. It doesn't matter what net worth you are, you're a human being at the end of the day. So if you think of it that way, going back to that example, yeah, he built an empire at what cost?
His kids.
Yeah. And I think that, you gotta sometimes break down the layers and get back to the human quality and advise your clients on that. And I think the real challenge is bringing in those younger generations, because like you said, like, these are mom and dad's advisors. I don't want anything to do with them. So really trying to integrate them into your practice, into the parents' practice, earlier rather than later, showing a real interest in them. They can smell a salesman a mile away. It's like really take an interest in things that they're interested in, and grab that generation before they fly away.
Go back to the services, I'm going to say the governance, because you both, and especially Dan and Jennifer, you talked about that and the risk. And it seems like, is that one of the most important things as people are considering setting up a family office, or when they should be asking questions, and what your firms bring to the table to advise your clients or prospects? Talk about that governance and why that's so critical.
What's great about our practice is it's very scalable. It's very bespoke. I mentioned that no two clients are the same, so their needs are not the same. We do very limited engagements for small nonprofits all the way up to billionaire families. Professional sports athletes, entertainers, and they all have different needs. We can do bill pay, we can run the payroll, we can do all of the lifestyle management, and by that I mean pretty much anything under the sun. We're doing everything for families except managing their investments. So we're managing their books and records, we're working very closely with their CPAs, whether that be in Kaufman Rossin or a third-party CPA throughout the year. We really become I'd say the center of the wheel, and have to communicate with all the spokes, because, we have the investment advisors, we have the trust and estate attorneys, we have the insurance professionals, every single person that touches that family, we have a relationship with. So we kind of become the quarterback. And what's great about it is a family could have a key person, whether that be a CFO or a CIO or something like that. And we work very closely with them, and we just become their back office. So again, it's the plug and play option. And there's that peace of mind that these people have done this for a long time, for many years. They know the pitfalls, and you don't have to figure it out on your own.
One of the things that we do is we have a third-party auditors that we use, right? So any of our investments, we don't do any of the analyst work. We don't do any of the projections. We don't do any of that in-house. We hire a third-party group who comes in and does it for us, because they're giving us an opinion of, here's what the financials are going to do over the next 5 years. Here's what the valuation could be in the next 5 years. And here's what the IRR is going to be based on our equity position, right? And I get a lot of family offices who will reach out to me going, hey, Deanna, who do you know that can help us with, we've got this media issue, or we've got an IP issue. There's a company that we're looking at, and, who do you use? And I'm like, I have like a slew of lawyers that I use for all kinds of different things. And people don't realize that lawyers are very specific. So you either have a trust and estate attorney, who you really need to have. Then you need to have someone who understands corporations, because some of your bylaws, some of your operating agreements, they may not be up to snuff, and they may not be protecting your investments, right?
Real estate attorney.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. And then you might need some IP attorneys, right? And I mean, because we're dealing in pro sports teams, I have to have franchise attorneys. I got to understand, what does this clause mean in this contract, which you can relate to, Mr. Dallas. And so, you've got to have all these different things. And then there's different CPA firms that are different, where they do different services.
It's that giant Rolodex. You're the go-to person. They ask you for everything.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
You got to fix the problem.
Exactly. And so, we help them with that. And they might even, like some family offices, I'm like, you guys probably need, there's a big family office is one of our advisors in the UK, right? They manage like 500 of the wealthiest families. I'm like, you guys need to talk to our advisor, because I think you guys are making some decisions that they may not be good for you in 5 years from now, but he does a lot of our review of our stuff. And if I feel like this is a great deal, but there's some areas that I feel like I'm missing, I will send it over to Stephen, and Stephen will take a look at it. And he'll come back and he will have a whole list of issues that he wants me to address and that he's addressed. And so I think it's really important that in part of your due diligence, you really need to have a group of people that are going to help you make the right decisions, because if you're just doing it solely on yourself, you're going to get burned.
So, Eric, I'm curious, as the four of us work in multifamily offices, you bring a different dynamic working in a single family office. As you hear this, and I've seen your reaction, you're nodding your head, shaking your head. Can you give a little glimpse how you operate within the single family office, how you're set up?
I mean, it's very sort of streamlined, because Mark has a lot of interaction with sort of everybody. And I'm assuming that other family offices are probably not like that, where the person at the top or 2 or 3 people at the top have sort of, constant direct communication with sort of everyone else in the family office. But that's how we operate it. It's very streamlined, and kind of everyone, for the most part, knows what's going on. I would say, kind of piggybacking off your point, like, yeah, everything, we have our inside counsel. We also have outside counsel that, truthfully, I think almost functions like inside counsel. Like, we're like this with them, and, pre-vetted, and they are specialized in a sort of lot of different things, and we lean on them a lot. And especially coming from us, and given, like, when we do investments, we kind of have a set sort of, terms that we like to work with, that we've gotten comfortable, that Mark's gotten comfortable with, like, over the years. And to have sort of, attorneys in the organization and sort of us surrounding them to sort of say to these companies, hey, we try to roughly do all these investments in a similar structure, because we know from experience that this is the best way for success going forward. That's how we sort of like to operate, where we have our very own internal standard operating procedures of how we like to make investments. But like I said, it's very internal to sort of, the walled garden within our organization. That's, Mark's been doing this for over 15 years. So we've really sort of established exactly, how we go through a diligence process, who has eyes on that. Then once we go into like term sheet phase, who has eyes on that, and carry it all the way through to, executing on a deal. So it's very self-contained and a very sort of streamlined process that everyone within the organization has kind of gotten to know.
It's like having guidelines, like banking guidelines.
We have guidelines.
Yeah, exactly. That's
written,
what we have too.
Written, unwritten, you know them.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing I'll add, we've sort of, talked about the multifamily office and then the single family office. But one thing, we see quite often in our space, and you may see it as well, is, when we do, when we work with those clients and we see one that, we are very scalable. I mean, we can provide a lot of services for multiple families at a very, a good cost. And it's white glove treatment, but every now and then there's a family that needs a little more. And so I think recognizing when those families sort of start to need that bridge to maybe not have the full blown Mark Cuban single family office, but maybe to start something small. We have one right now that, they're still a family office client of ours, but we're in the process of helping them set up the governance documents, LLC to create a very, very small single family office, like 2 employees. What prompted it was they've got multiple pilots. They have some boats. They've got, captains. They've got nannies, and they wanted to give health insurance to all these people. And we were trying to figure out, how do we do this? And anyway, that along with some need for some travel arrangements, some just overall family coordinator, we decided a small family office was the best option. So I think too, there can be that.
And there's
that
different,
bridge.
so that's what we do. So whether if you don't want to still start your own, there are options out there. And I think that a lot of people just don't realize that there are these options, that we do offer all of these services, and you still don't have to set up your own single family office. So it's just education.
It is.
And asking the right questions.
So how do we get the education out there? Because that's always the question. Do I form my own single family office? Do I go to somebody like what we have, multifamily offices? Do I just work with an attorney? What do you say? Is there people ask me, how much money do I need all the time?
I don't think that it's a level of money, really. It's just like, how much headache do you want to have to deal with? And sometimes that people want that. They're very private. Nope, I want to form my own. And others, we have billionaire clients that just don't want to deal with it, but we can fully function as their single family office in a multifamily office space. We have dedicated employees and teams that, that's basically their go-to. My clients have my cell phone number. They're usually respectful, but I'm available 24/7. So,
and maybe it's like we're a single. We do. It's not I don't think amount of how much money you have, but maybe it's a function of volume. Like we do a lot of deals, and keeping track of that with 1 or 2 people would probably be very hard, and a lot would slip through the cracks, especially when you have like a brand name surrounding you and you want to sort of have an inner circle of sort of trust in who you're working with. I think that lends itself to maybe, hey, I want to build out a family office. Rather, if you're like, hey, I'm going to dibble and dabble here like that, maybe, you sort of outsource more functions, or you work with, you become part of a multi-family office. But I will also comment that when we're going through investments or whatever we're doing, I mean, it's not just all internal. Like I'm always reaching out to other family offices in my network, or just other funds, or it really doesn't matter. Here's a deal that I'm looking at. What are your guys' thoughts? I think you have investments in this space. Have you seen this company before, or have you looked at something similar? What are your thoughts? So it's, even though the structure might be internal, it's very not a walled garden. We try to be very collaborative in the community.
Yeah, I get a lot of those calls too. And, back to your question about, how much money do you need? It depends on what you want to do. I mean, I think if you're going to do a single family office, typically you want to try to be somewhere around, $300-500 million, right? Because it's going to cost you a lot of money a year to run that. Okay. And what is going to be your thesis? A lot of times they want to have a family office, but they haven't sat down and it's just like the mission statement. What is your mission? What is your goal? What are you passionate about? And, for the 3rd, 4th generations, you're seeing that they're all jumping hyper on venture capital funds, but why? We have tons of family offices that we counsel that are in venture capital. And I'm like, I've been telling them for a couple of years, slow down on that a little bit, because you're throwing money into these funds, and not all of the companies that they're investing in are going to be successful. So you're going to have a really large measure of risk, because you're going to lose money on some of those deals. Right? Rather than doing, and I don't know if many of you know this, but a lot of family offices prefer direct investments, right?
We don't like funds. Pretty much exclusively only do direct, because we want to be able to actually influence the outcome, or at least help the outcome of the companies we invest in. If you're in a fund,
you can't.
You're not you might not even, Mark has we don't know about the companies.
Yeah.
And Mark has the special ability to be able to post something on social media and maybe get a bunch of, traffic to their website and help that company out. But if he's kind of, invested in a fund, it's just not the same, direct level of involvement, which works, I'm sure, for plenty of family office, but doesn't work for us.
Yeah. I think more in your traditional family offices, they don't. And they shy away from it. I mean, we're doing our first fund, and I really did not want to do it, but I had to because we're part of the Arctos NFL, right? Other than that, I would not be doing a fund.
And I'm assuming a lot of these family offices are built off the, backs of entrepreneurs that were involved in a business, and then to sort of just say, I'm just going to throw money in a bunch of funds where I don't, really have control where it's going. It kind of, I would assume, it goes against the ethos maybe of a lot of family offices, maybe especially at least like first generation family, which ours is actually a first generation family office.
And I think too, to that point, if you really don't have a good reason for the family office and a good why of why it's there, and
Then call me and I'll handle your stuff for you, right? Jennifer?
yeah, and
Jennifer and I can do that.
yeah, but what happens is it gets created, and then when you get down, I mean, I now see family offices that they want out. The second and third generations, they're
Absolutely.
like, we don't want this. We don't want to be in an LLC and in business with our cousins and that we never see. Why do we have to use their advisors and the same people? So if you don't have that strong foundation, it can all unravel.
And I don't know how much time we have left, and this is kind of totally off topic, but I did want to touch on security. I think it's a big issue that's coming up. So I don't know if we can
Go ahead.
maybe talk
That's a
about
good
that, because we're talking about investments and trying to make money, but you can lose money very quickly. And I know it's projected next year by security professionals that $6 trillion worth of cybercrime is going to be committed. And I think that family offices and ultra high net worth really are exposed because they don't have the same type of risk mitigation and cybersecurity protections as a large enterprise, but they're dealing with a lot of money, and cyber criminals know that. And I think that there are some things that just even you and I as individuals can do that we don't really think about. It's very inexpensive to encrypt your Wi-Fi. That is a really dangerous way. People come in a landscaping truck and they have access to an entire gated community. So if you're not protecting the signal that's coming into your house, that's one. Don't use public email. Don't use Gmail. It gets compromised. So have your own domain. Make sure that the apps on your phone, it might not be you, but what about your kids? TikTok, WhatsApp, Snapchat. These are surveillance tools, and there are 14 extortion cases that happen every month, and half of those are with Snapchat. So it's very important that people understand what apps are on their phones. And really, the biggest thing is multi-factor authentication and training your team, training your staff about all of this, that the passwords have to be not duplicated across all the websites. They have to be strong, at least 12 characters, and changed frequently, but really the multi-factor authentication. So, I think people really need to understand that security is a big thing. We've seen it with the very untimely, the murder of the United Healthcare CEO. People have information that you don't even realize. It is so easy to get information. So I think that's a really big trend that people really need to have on their radar.
Yeah, and that's a great topic, because the family offices 20, 30 years ago, you didn't know who they were. And today, especially over the last decade, people have access to them in ways that they never did before. And it can be very scary. And, even like with athletes, you have to be so careful with information that you have about them. Things like, I rarely post stuff on social media.
I'm sure, Eric, you have
Yeah.
tons of issues that.
Oh, we don't post anything. What are you talking about? But I will comment we do have a very robust email filter, because emails that should come through don't come through all the time.
Yeah.
But we also, it's just running like a regular office. Like we'll send out the sort of fake spam, trap to see if you get fished or whatever. And if within the organization, if you fail, I've never failed, but if you do fail, you have to go to a seminar on how to not fall for that again. So I guess I would implore other family officers to set up to treat it like sort of those corporate, safeguards in place like any other sort of larger company would.
Yeah. It's unfortunate because again, you go back to that, like there's no checks and balances in place. You've got maybe one or two people that have no training, that maybe from a little older generation, they're not used to all these phishing scams. They don't have complicated passwords. They don't understand all of these risks. And then there goes your money.
And I think in addition to your point, which is so great, that the education needs to be at the family office level and for all of us that are actually, getting the work done, but it also needs to get down to the family members.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a key thing, especially for these, these teens, and they've got to know that they can't post pictures that the whole family's going on a safari to Africa. I mean, not good to put that out there.
We had one guy, he was a third generation. Now listen to this. He's on TikTok. The call numbers of his private plane was photographed, and someone found and tracked where he was, and they tried to kidnap him.
Oh yeah, that's totally
believable. You would never think about that, but okay, it happens. It's crazy stuff.
So I knew we would use more than the hour allotted, and it was a great topic, and all of you hit so many different. When we were preparing for this last week, I knew we were all sharing stories and talking about this, and it's a great dynamic. And even though we titled this Family Office, and Jennifer, you said it, it's all advice now that people need to listen to. It's not just the wealthy, the ultra high net worth, it's all of us. And I think the advice is changing in our space, where you're not just talking about investments. You're not talking just about estate planning, but it's all of the services and the governance and how fast, and Eric, you brought it up, how fast of information and ideas that come up. So, I really appreciate it. Quite honestly, I was selfish in doing this panel, but I learned so much from the four of you. It's great to see the energy and the excitement, but I think the key that I take away from this is really the communication. Somebody said it. You have to be leaning on your advisors, and your best advisor is the one that's going to probe, and not just when you come and ask them a question. They're going to ask. You got to have an advisor that asks why and go deeper, and not afraid to ask the questions that might be off grounds or not allowed to ask. So
I always ask those questions.
Those are your best advisors that go deep. So I think we're getting the hook a little bit. So, but any parting words of advice? Otherwise, we'll thank you for the time, and hopefully this was helpful for everybody. Really appreciate it, and thank you to the World Strategic Forum for including us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.